This morning, I sat by the window longer than usual. Not because I was waiting for anything important, just because the light fell a certain way across the floor and I didn't want to interrupt it. At my age, mornings feel different. They're quieter, not peaceful, just thinner somehow, as if the day doesn't fully arrive anymore. My name is Eleanor. I'm 102 years old. I've lived long enough that people assume I must have answers. They speak to me gently, like I'm holding something fragile. But most days, I don't feel wise. I feel late. There was a time when mornings were something I rushed through. Coffee half finished, shoes put on while standing, thoughts already 10 steps ahead of my body. I used to believe mornings were a nuisance, something to get past, so the real day could begin. Now, the day doesn't rush me anymore. It waits. And I'm the one who hesitates. I don't remember the exact moment I realized how much time I had spent assuming I had more of it. There wasn't a dramatic event, no announcement, just a slow, uncomfortable noticing, like finding a crack in the wall you've lived beside for years and suddenly wondering how long it's been there. When you're young, time feels generous. It stretches, it forgives. You postpone things without feeling like you're losing anything. You say later as if it's a room you can always walk into. At 102, later is no longer a place. It's a word that echoes. I don't think about death very often. That surprises people. What I think about is waiting, how natural it felt, how harmless it seemed, how invisible it was while it was happening. I waited to feel ready. I waited for things to settle. I waited for a version of life that never officially arrived. And the strange part is, I didn't feel like I was wasting anything. I felt responsible, sensible, patient. That's what unsettles me now. I look back, not at the big mistakes, but at the quiet decisions, the pauses, the delays that didn't feel like delays at the time, just temporary choices, just breathing room. If I'm honest, I still don't fully understand when waiting turns into losing. I only know that one day, without warning, I was old. And I can't stop wondering how much of my life slipped past while I believed it was simply on hold. For most of my life, I lived by a single, gentle belief. I have time. It didn't feel like a belief. It felt like a fact. The kind of truth you don't question because everyone around you lives the same way. Time was something you spent, yes, but also something that replenished itself. You slept, you woke, and there it was again. In my 20s, time felt obedient. It followed me. I could ignore it, waste it, or borrow against it, and it never protested. I worked long days and told myself rest would come later. I postponed conversations because they felt uncomfortable. I delayed decisions because there was no urgency yet. Urgency felt dramatic, impulsive. I admired people who acted quickly, but I didn't trust them. I trusted patience, planning, waiting until things were clearer. I believed clarity came with time. In my 30s and 40s, the belief matured. It became practical, responsible. Life was busy then: work, routines, expectations. There were bills to pay and roles to fill. Waiting felt like discipline, like maturity. If something felt uncertain, I postponed it. If something felt difficult, I softened it with time. If something felt deeply important, I told myself it deserved the right moment. I rarely asked who decided when that moment would be. Time became a cushion. Whenever something hurt or confused me, I placed it there. Not discarded, just stored, safely, temporarily. Or so I thought. I didn't think I was avoiding life. I thought I was managing it. I told myself I'd reconnect later. I told myself I'd slow down later. I told myself I'd feel more deeply when things were less demanding, and things were always demanding. There was no fear in this belief. That's what makes it dangerous. Fear might have warned me, but I have time felt comforting, rational, almost kind. It never crossed my mind that time doesn't wait the way people do, that it doesn't pause simply because you ask it to. I didn't disrespect time. I just underestimated it. And for decades, it let me. The years didn't rush past me. That's the lie people tell. They say life flies by, as if it happens all at once. It didn't. It moved slowly enough to feel stable. My days filled with ordinary things. Work that demanded attention but not affection. Evenings that blurred together. Weekends that felt earned and then disappeared. I remember thinking more than once that life would feel real later. That this phase, whatever phase I was in, was temporary. A bridge to something fuller. But bridges are meant to be crossed. I lingered on mine. There were birthdays that came and went with polite smiles. Holidays that felt repetitive. Conversations that ended with, "We should do this again," and never did. None of it felt tragic. That's the unsettling part. It all felt fine. I watched younger people make bold choices and thought they were reckless. I watched older people slow down and thought they were finished. I stayed in the middle, telling myself I was balanced. Years passed in increments too small to feel. A job became a career without my permission. Habits hardened into identity. Relationships settled into patterns that felt permanent. I rarely stopped to look closely. Looking closely felt indulgent. I thought awareness would come naturally with age, that one day I'd wake up and understand what mattered. Until then, I kept moving. Not fast, just consistently. Time didn't announce itself. It didn't warn me. It simply accumulated. One day, I realized my reflection had changed. Another day, I noticed names disappearing from my address book. Another, I realized certain opportunities no longer presented themselves, not because I refused them, but because they stopped arriving. Even then, I didn't panic. I adjusted. That's how unnoticed loss happens. You adjust. You trade dreams for explanations. You trade curiosity for familiarity. You trade presence for preparation. And life continues. I thought I was living inside it. I didn't realize I was skimming the surface. The first crack wasn't dramatic. No hospital room. No sudden goodbye. It was a conversation I never finished. Someone I loved deeply, quietly tried to talk to me about something that mattered to them. I remember feeling tired that day, distracted. I remember thinking, this can wait. I nodded. I reassured. I postponed. They didn't push. People rarely do when you teach them you're busy. Time passed. Not much, just enough. When I realized the conversation would never happen, the feeling wasn't grief at first. It was confusion, as if a door had closed without making a sound. I told myself there would be other chances, other conversations, other moments of clarity, and life allowed me to believe that for a while. I continued the way I always had, working, planning, deferring. I didn't suddenly change. Cracks don't do that. They let the structure stand while quietly weakening it. There were more moments like that. Missed dinners, unreturned calls, delayed honesty, each one small enough to dismiss. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern I didn't recognize until much later. I felt unsettled sometimes, a vague discomfort I couldn't name. But discomfort is easy to outrun. You add a responsibility. You stay busy. You tell yourself you'll reflect later. Later remained cooperative. I didn't know it was keeping score. It took me a long time to understand that wasn't postponing tasks or decisions. I was postponing presence. I delayed sitting with people when it felt inconvenient. I delayed asking myself difficult questions. I delayed allowing moments to fully reach me. I thought I was protecting myself from overwhelm, from uncertainty. What I was really doing was thinning my life. There were relationships I kept polite instead of honest. Feelings I kept manageable instead of deep. Experiences I kept planned instead of lived. I told myself depth would come when things were calmer. They never were. What I postponed didn't disappear. It waited quietly until it was too late to retrieve. I postponed forgiveness, assuming time would soften the hurt. I postponed joy, assuming it would feel better when earned. I postponed rest, assuming it would be sweeter later. I didn't realize postponement has a cost. It charges interest. By the time I noticed, what I wanted wasn't just delayed, it was unreachable. And that's when waiting stopped feeling neutral. That's when it began to feel heavy. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It settled in slowly, like dusk. I was old when I finally understood that time doesn't respond to intention. Wanting to live fully someday doesn't create that day. Planning to be present later doesn't make presence wait for you. Time only recognizes action. By the time I understood that, most of my life had already been spent preparing. I wasn't devastated. That surprises people. I was calm. But calm can still hurt. I accepted that I had lived a careful life, a sensible one, a postponed one. I accepted that much of what I thought I was waiting for was simply never going to arrive. Not because it was impossible, but because I didn't meet it when it passed me by. That's a quiet kind of loss. It doesn't scream. It doesn't accuse. It just sits with you. I don't know your life. I don't know what you're delaying or why. I only know how convincing waiting can feel. You probably think you're being careful, responsible, thoughtful. So did I. You probably believe the things that matter will still be there when you're ready. I believed that too. I'm not here to warn you. I wouldn't know how. Life doesn't listen to warnings. I only wonder quietly what you're placing on hold without realizing it's passing.